All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode number 2 of the Bitcoin Bum podcast. I'm your host, the Bitcoin Bum. Today, we are diving into a principle. The first episode didn't really get super in depth with the theme of the actual outline for this show, which is diving through Bitcoin through the lens of principles. So today's principle, we're going to be talking about faith, taking a leap of faith more specifically, and how Bitcoin can either help you find faith or deepen faith. My guest today is a buddy of mine I met at the Bitcoin conference, Asher. Asher is building some pretty sweet stuff for off-grid capable and or just very mobile capable node setups. So without further ado, I will throw it to him to kind of let him introduce himself. What's up, Asher? Thanks for coming on, man.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Kyle. I appreciate the introduction. So like you said, I'm working on a couple of different projects right now. One of them is a business that I started at the beginning of this year called Launch Window. And Launch Window's goal is to create kind of military grade Bitcoin hardware. So we're starting with the Bitcoin full node, potentially plans to move into cold storage and some other stuff later down the road. But so far, in the R&D phase, but it's had a really good reception. I was lucky enough to get to present some of the work that I've done at the Bitcoin conference, where, like you said, we met, and it was pretty well received. I got some good feedback, some helpful comments, from some of the guys that have been doing it a lot longer than me in this space. But yeah, it's been going well. So that's kind of what my main business focus right now. And then I also have a nonprofit that I'm on the board of. I'm the chief technology officer of Motiv, MOTIV.NGO, which is helping to build Bitcoin economies in South America.
Sweet. There's definitely a lot of that going on at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah, we kind of hit the zeitgeist here like last week, or 2 weeks ago, whenever it was that President Bukele announced the Bitcoin law in El Salvador. It exceeded my expectations for, where we'd be going from the legal and regulatory side of things.
Right. Have you guys, with that nonprofit, have you felt kind of like any significant seismic shifts since that announcement?
Man, it's hard to say. All the Latin American countries are really different, and Peru just had their presidential election at the beginning of this month, and I don't even know if it's fully resolved yet. I know there was, just like we had here in 2020, there's a lot of legislation and lawsuits and allegations of fraud and everything back and forth, but it looks like the far left party may have won the election. I haven't read the latest today, so we'll see what the final result is, but the president there is kind of, the feeling is that Bitcoin is kind of below the radar. It's not on the national spotlight in Peru, which is good and bad. It's good because we have room to maneuver and kind of introduce Bitcoin to a lot of people without too much government spotlight. But it's also, every country is kind of falling behind El Salvador right now. The president of El Salvador sent up a flare, sent up a signal. He's kind of taking the lead right now in terms of government support and government permission for Bitcoin businesses to operate, for people to use Bitcoin, for people to take control over their financial future with Bitcoin. And the rest of the world is now has to play a game of catch up. And I think the US is going to be pretty far behind just because everything here moves slow. And have to see where Peru comes in. I don't know what the new president's, if he's made any comments about Bitcoin. I don't think so. So it's kind of a mystery ball right now.
Okay, and now Peru is essentially where your nonprofit is doing the heaviest amount of work, correct?
Yeah, we have a really good team in Peru, mostly focused in Peru right now. We have some plans to move into other countries in the near future, and we're also looking at ways if there's a way to help out with what's going on in El Salvador, because there's a lot of good people there. Cash App has some folks there, the guys down at Bitcoin Beach, obviously Strike, Jack Mahler's firm. There's just a lot of, El Salvador is becoming like a center of gravity for a lot of the Bitcoin businesses right now. And the inertia is just moving in that direction. So even though we're not in country, we're kind of looking at ways we can support what's going on there, whether it's within El Salvador or just trying to export the success they've had in El Salvador into neighboring countries in Central and South America.
That's fantastic, man. Yeah, it's not really a big surprise that the energy once announced kind of just immediately started gravitating towards El Salvador. It's huge news. It's not something that was put out and then kind of just like, well, we're just making an announcement. And like 72 hours after making an announcement that legislation was going to get put forth, it had already passed. So they're not wasting any
Yeah.
time down there. They seem to be taking things very seriously, which is it's fantastic. I mean, it's a country that's literally kind of diving down the principle we're talking about today, which is taking a leap of faith. El Salvador needed to do something, as I think a lot of Central and South American countries do, that struggle with the side effects of not receiving the benefits that come with the dollar hegemony that may actually accrue to American citizens. I mean, if you're in the US, all of this printing, albeit still hurting the bottom line of the poorest in our society, at least they're receiving stimulus checks and topped off unemployment benefits. If you're in El Salvador or some of these other Central South American countries that are on the dollar standard, you're not receiving any of that. The only thing you're getting is the same thing that your government was giving you when it was their currency, which is the constant devaluation of your purchasing power. So pretty cool to see.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, and like you said, I think it is it does tie in with the whole leap of faith or faith theme of this episode because, I mean, not only did the law pass within 72 hours, like you mentioned, it passed with a supermajority in their legislative branch, so it wasn't even like a contentious kind of thing, and something as crazy as changing the official currency. Can you imagine the political nonsense that would go on in America if we tried to change the currency? But no, it's like the entire country and all the political powers that be are kind of, they've agreed to do this experiment essentially. No other country has done it. It's, people have done it, corporations have done it, but not an entire country. This is like the next level. And if it's a success story, which I think it will be, given the team that's there, yeah, I think it's a model that a lot of the world can benefit from.
I agree. I mean, it's super exciting, dude. Like the fact that that bill was 3 pages long. It's like when you want to talk about expediency and like the capability of just like what it would not look like in the United States of America. What are our bills? 5, 6, 700 pages long. It's like it's
Yeah.
you're going to be implementing a Bitcoin standard, and at the same time you're going to be like having 40 pages about boiling of the oceans. So it's like I love that there are places out there that are a little different. It's cool to see. I
Yep.
see you've got your project back there behind you, kind of set up and showing off a little bit. You want to give us a rundown of what it is you're actually building?
Yeah. So what's behind me here? This is kind of my flagship product that's still in the R&D phase, where the project name is Comet. So the idea behind this project is to create a truly mobile, off-the-grid Bitcoin node. So in at the beginning of the year, I'll give you a little bit of the backstory about how I kind of came to this,
That
the
was going to be
decision to
my next
pursue
question.
this, and
It's kind of how you found yourself here.
yeah. So last year I really got into Bitcoin. I mean, I'd read about it a few years ago, and I thought it was interesting, and I bought a little bit and I sold a little bit, but I didn't consider it like a career path. Like there were things that I could contribute to the Bitcoin ecosystem myself, or anything like that. But last year I really decided to take another look at it. I was working in private equity at the time. I wasn't super happy with my day job. So I was looking for another path to go down, and Bitcoin had so much excitement around it. So I, started researching Bitcoin, and it wasn't too long, falling down the rabbit hole before I decided, I need to run my own Bitcoin node to really learn how this thing works. So I threw together like a Raspberry Pi. It's kind of this like off-the-shelf computer, mini computer, built like the crummiest Bitcoin node you can buy or build, and it was enough to work, and get me started and kind of learn like how does the Bitcoin ecosystem actually work from the node side. And then I had a power outage because I live in Southern California and our energy grid is garbage. Our energy grid is so bad. We have rolling blackouts constantly, and it's about to be fire season again. So What ended up happening was my hard drive and all of my data that was on my Bitcoin node got completely corrupted because the power just cut off, and that, I guess that was enough. So I went back to the drawing board and said, okay, well, what can I do to build this thing, beef it up a little bit so that it's not going to get taken out just because the power flickers for a minute here. So I started looking into ways to fortify a Bitcoin node, and I immediately thought back to my military experience, where they gave us all kinds of cool gear that worked in the middle of the desert, and it was built, bulletproof computers and stuff, crazy things. And I just borrowed a lot of the design philosophy that we had for some of the systems I was using in the desert, and ended up building a Bitcoin node that fits inside of a Pelican case. There's a couple other manufacturers as well that make hard cases, but using Pelican for now.
It's a good, solid brand.
Yeah, great brand, great American brand, made in the USA. I love it. I've been using their products for years and years, so no reason to fix what isn't broken.
I don't think I don't know anybody in the military or that's served that isn't a fan. I mean, we've all been given Pelican stuff. They are durable and, like you said, built to last. So if you're looking to build anything such as like a node, and you want it to be rough and tough and secure, Pelican's not a terrible choice. So
yeah, it's been working. Exactly, it's been working great so far. For a lot of different reasons too. There's crazy stuff that you just get as like a benefit for using a Pelican case as an enclosure for your project. Like this Bitcoin node actually floats in the water because its density is less than water. So let's say you were on a boat and you didn't want to lose your Bitcoin in a boating accident. This would not be the tool for you, but maybe there's a different purpose. If you live in an area that's prone to flash flooding or something like that, and you'd like to have a system that you can find in the event of a flood. That's just one of the tangential benefits that come along with this kind of setup. So Pelican case, and then full Bitcoin node on the inside with a battery system, so that if the primary grid goes down and you lose your source of electricity, your Bitcoin node isn't going to crash and your hard drive isn't going to get wiped like mine was. It's just going to revert to battery power. And then
currently with the setup that you're in, with the whatever phase of the project with R&D, what's the battery life on the system you're running?
So I ran it overnight, sealed up the Pelican case, ran it overnight, and it lasted about 11 hours. But I think we can do a lot better than that. I think we can get up to 3 days because there's a couple of optimizations that I've made since then, and I haven't done a full life battery test, but I switched the storage system from an SSD, which is a really efficient way to store data, but there's actually a more energy efficient hard drive called an M.2 storage drive. So we moved that, and that saves about 30% of the energy that we were spending just on reading and writing to the hard drive on the Bitcoin node. And then using a bigger battery too. I think that gets us up to 72 hours without any access to any electricity. And then the option to charge with solar panels as well, just in case you need to run longer than that 72 hours. If you guys have access to a solar panel, or you can even attach a solar panel to the outside of this Pelican case, you should be able to run it indefinitely as long as you have 4 to 6 hours of sunlight per day.
What kind of connection are you running? This is getting a little bit technical, but what kind of connection are you running from the panel to the charging for the battery? Is it direct, like 12 volts, or is it, how does that?
15 volts through an inverter.
Perfect.
So yeah, and then it actually that's another opportunity to kind of gain some energy efficiency. Not to go into like a physics lesson here, and you probably know because I know you run a solar panel at your home, but when you change voltages, you lose some of the energy. So right now I'm actually stepping down from 15 to 12 because the electronics that I'm running inside run on 12 volts, but my solar input is 15. So I'm actually losing a little bit of energy there. That's another thing that I can optimize to kind of get some more electricity. So that's why I say we're still in the R&D phase, research and development, because we kind of have the whole product together, but there's just like a couple of fine tuning things that I need to do to get it retail ready.
Yeah, dude, it's an amazing project. It's like I've been looking at nodes for a while personally, being, as you said, kind of in an off-grid situation, and the biggest challenge on my end has been this idea of like, where do I get? I mean, my energy is not a huge concern, so the loss of power isn't like my biggest concern. But for me, somebody like me, like my biggest challenge is that I don't have the capability to run a 24-hour internet connection. I can't like call Verizon and have them come run like fiber optics in this like random park I'm parked in. So it becomes a bit of a challenge. You want to kind of touch on how you get around that with your.
Yeah, sure. So there's really, when you run a Bitcoin node, there's typically two things that you would plug into it. You've got power and you've got internet. So we kind of talked about power, how we're solving that with batteries and solar panels. Um, and then the internet side, there's kind of two different options that we've configured. The first is using a dedicated 4G hotspot, which you can do off of T-Mobile, Sprint, Verizon, or internationally, any mainstream carrier. You can either, if they don't sell their own hotspot, kind of dedicated little box, you can just use a phone and set one up to function solely as a hotspot. That's pretty easy to do on Android. So that's one option to get internet connectivity that's pretty mobile. But again, if you get too far out of the city, you might run into a place where you don't have 4G internet, or if you're in the middle of the ocean, you're not going to have 4G signal. So the other option is satellite connection. And there's kind of two ways to do satellite connection right now. The first is a downstream from or downlink from Blockstream. It's a company that builds a lot of Bitcoin technology. They have pass the Bitcoin network, the blockchain 24/7 for free. So as long as you buy an antenna and configure it and point it at the right part of the sky, you'll be able to receive a signal, a data signal that has the entire Bitcoin blockchain on it, which is enough to sync up your node to the network. That's one option, and it's okay. The better option is using SpaceX's Starlink system, because it's really high bandwidth. It's like a constellation of like more than 10,000 satellites in low Earth orbit. So because there's 10,000 satellites, pretty much no matter where you are on Earth, you're going to be able to get a direct line of sight to one of them. And because they're in low Earth orbit, it's the radio signal doesn't have to go as far, so it's just a faster signal. It's basically like having broadband everywhere. So SpaceX's Starlink network is getting turned on in Peru, where my nonprofit works, at the end of this year. So we're going to go down there, deploy some Bitcoin nodes in the middle of the jungle in some of the more rural places with satellite connections to SpaceX's system, if everything works out. So that's going to be like November, December, maybe Q1 of next year if things get delayed. But it's looking pretty good for the end of this year.
That's amazing, man. From the sounds of it, I'm still a little bit kind of screwed with the idea of a constant. I think the developments are just going to take time. I mean, for sure, it's coming. I know with things like SpaceX, they have already talked about and have like pushed forward patents to be able to kind of use the satellites in more than one location, like have it work while mobile. But I know I've had this discussion with a few people about the SpaceX Starlink satellites that they have now, and unfortunately, it's still location dependent. So it's like you set it up for a particular location, and that's where it works. And if you're moving and you're bouncing around from place to place, then you actually no longer have that internet connection that you would find in the location where you had originally set it up. So for somebody mobile like me,
you are.
I'm sorry, I'm what?
You're right. You're right about that. No, that's 100% right. It's a limitation. It's actually an artificial limitation SpaceX put in themselves because they don't want to have too many people using their one satellite. So it's not like your antenna doesn't actually work. It's just SpaceX is registering your antenna to a particular zip code or particular geography, and they blacklist you if you go outside of that geography. And the reason they're doing that, they say, is to prevent one satellite from getting overloaded. They're just going to say, all right, well, if you live in Orange County, California, your satellite dish is only going to work in Orange County, California. But it's not an actual physical problem. It's a restriction that SpaceX put in themselves just to help manage the bandwidth of their network and keep every satellite operating pretty quickly. So the SpaceX system, again, there's a drawback to everything. Like you said, the drawdown from the SpaceX system is you can't travel with it. Um, the good side is if you know that where you're going to be and you're going to be stuck there, even if it's in the middle of nowhere, you should be able to get it to work.
Yeah, it's true. There's drawdowns with everything, man. And one of the drawdowns with van life is that running a node is a bit of a challenge.
We'll figure it out. This is my new mission in life. I'm gonna get you up and running. We're
No,
gonna
no,
get you
no,
a
no,
system
no, no,
that
no. Can't
that's
can't
gonna
be your new
work.
mission. I can appreciate a little bit of help, but the people of Peru in the jungle and the overall network needs more than I do. I will figure out how to run a node if it comes down to just getting out of the van and getting into someplace with a steady internet connection. We'll make the shift that we need to make. But I appreciate the mission that you are already on. So that's stick to that, dude.
Thanks.
So
I appreciate it. It's good to hear some friendly words. It's a leap of faith. Like we said, I didn't have, there's no instruction manual for what I'm doing. I'm just kind of going in whatever direction feels right every day. And so far it's been going well. But I don't know how long it's going to last, but I'm going to keep grinding on it until it either works or it doesn't in some capacity.
that's amazing, man. And that's kind of where I was just about to go, is that like you had touched on a little bit where you were at in career. You said something in finance, was it?
Yeah, mergers and acquisitions. So I was buying and selling small businesses.
How did you find yourself there after the military as a medic?
Yeah, that's an interesting story. I left the military in 2016, and I knew I was going to leave about a year before I actually left. So I started planning, what am I going to do after the Army? I knew the Army wasn't right for me long term. I had a great time there, met the best people I've ever met, and learned a ton about myself and the world in general. So it's not like I have anything bad to say about military service. I think it's a great thing, but it wasn't for me long term. So about a year before I actually left the military, I started taking online classes, studying digital media and web design at Harvard. And then when I fully left the military, I actually moved up to Boston, and I had taken about half the number of classes that I needed for a master's degree. So I finished my master's on campus at Harvard in 2017. And I was looking around for a job, and I got an internship at a private equity fund, which had nothing to do with what I was studying directly, but it turned out there was some overlap. So I met some folks that work in private equity doing investments all over the country, and interned at their fund. I was in 2017 in Boston. And then the following year, I decided, well, this is an interesting thing that they're doing. I got to learn more about business, because the one thing they don't teach you in the Army is anything about business. That is not part of the curriculum. So I moved out to California and did my master's in business at Pepperdine University. And when I graduated, I got an offer to work for the firm that I had interned at in Boston, down here in Orange County. So that's how I kind of transitioned from, kind of went all over the place, studying information technology at Harvard to studying business in California to getting a job in private equity and investments.
Sounds like you're an all-in kind of guy, man. You're talking about 1 year before you got out of the military, you start taking classes, and by the time you get out, you're halfway done with a master's degree. Like that's,
yeah.
You were like, this is where I'm going, and just like straight into the pool, man. I love it.
Yep. Fail
Yeah,
fast, right? You got to fail fast.
yeah. Unless you're Bitcoin, then you want to take everything nice and slow and steady. But I do find that outside of what Bitcoin is doing, the tech that I don't know if it is a tech motto really, but like I know it tends to be talked about a lot in VC and tech, which is that very idea. It's like fail fast, fail hard, fail often, and then succeed. So I like the concept outside of things that need to be secure. I mean, when you're I guess it would also probably not apply to the military. In the military, it would be a terrible motto to fail fast, fail hard, and fail often. Like that would not be pretty.
It's
So
not what people want to hear for their medic. I'm going to fail fast here.
yeah, it would not be the way to go. So it's an interesting concept, but with Bitcoin, it's a little bit different. And I think for me, that's been a bit of the real challenge with kind of like figuring out where I fit inside of Bitcoin. And I don't know if you, I mean, it sounds like you figured out you needed to do something more than what you were doing, and just kind of like was like, all right, this is the route and I'm in. And I would say that for me inside of Bitcoin, it's taken a little bit longer to actually figure out what it is that I can do to add to the space. It's like I know I'm at a point where that leap of faith is something I'm ready to take. It's like I understand my own personal conviction in Bitcoin is beyond 100%. It's like I've got 100% of my net worth inside of Bitcoin at this point. I can't do any more buy and hodl than I'm already doing. So the
Only 100%. You're not levered up.
no leverage, man. Like the conviction is real, but like once I got to the point where the conversation started going towards leverage, it was like it's not an option. I'm not like 100% anti-leverage, but I'm like looking at my options as far as like where can I go beyond 100%. And personally, for me, going beyond 100%, it seems like the better option is not to leverage up financially, but to figure out a way physically and or infrastructure wise to like somehow add value to the space, whether it be through this podcast, whether it be through finding work at a Bitcoin focused company, some kind of Bitcoin nonprofit, some of the things you're doing. Like that's where I see myself right now, is that it's like I know I need to be doing more, not buying more. So like I'm trying to find where that makes sense for me, like that place where I can dive in and just really give it everything I've got. And I guess right now the number one thing I'm leaning on is just trying to use my passion for conversation and meeting new people, and trying to use something like this podcast and a platform online to help put other people's stories out there. Because I think what you're building, the kind of stuff you're doing with the nonprofits, some of the other guys you introduced me to down in Miami, it's the kind of stuff that I'm here for, man. Like I went to Miami super stoked on the idea of hearing all these keynote speakers that I listened to all day and learned from all day. I watched none of them. I literally didn't catch a single one of them. I caught the tail end of Ron Paul. And after that, I was just so blown away at like all of the pleb energy, man. Just like so many people that you'll never hear about or haven't heard about yet, because I don't necessarily think it's true that you won't hear about all of them. I think some of the things, like again, like what you're building, man, there's no way more people aren't going to get involved with that. It's such a cool project.
Thank you. So last time we talked, I heard you were moving. Have you moved yet, and how's that going?
Yeah, so I've been looking at transitioning into Austin, Texas, and I'm here now. I actually just got back into town. I was up in Dallas yesterday doing a small renovation project. I posted online about my air conditioner, which after a 24-hour test run, I've already come to the conclusion is just not going to work. It's way too it's way too energy. What's the word I'm looking for? Energy.
Consumption?
Yeah, that's not the right word, but yes, energy consuming, energy heavy, intensive. There's the word I'm looking for. It's too energy intensive, and even with 18 solar panels and 500 amp hours of battery, running the AC is just not. I mean, I could probably run it for a few hours a day in the middle of like the most intense sun, which I guess would be somewhat helpful, but I still got to turn it off once it starts cresting towards 2-3 o'clock in the afternoon. So the challenge I'm running into right now with my move is that it's very, very, very hot here in Austin, Texas. And without any kind of air conditioning, it's a little bit less than ideal. And it's only supposed to get hotter. From everybody I've talked to, we are not at peak summer heats yet. So yes, I am looking at moving. no, I'm not 100% certain it's going to actually work out. I have some things lined up as far as work goes, which would help, but I don't know. I'm still exploring my options at the moment, if we're being 100% honest. The real challenge is that, like, in looking at the places weather wise that are ideal in the summer, there's not a lot of them that are also in line with like kind of like ease of living. Like van life has its fair share of challenges. It's speaking of leap of faith, like the van life personally, like the leap of faith for me into van life started 5 years ago. I was living in my parents' basement. I was really just starting to kind of get clean from several years of like very serious alcohol addiction, anabolic steroid abuse. It was a pretty dark couple of years post-military for me. And van life, it presented itself to me, funnily enough, like through yoga. I like found yoga. Yoga helped really kind of start the transition into like healthier ways of living. And as that all started to happen, things just started making kind of really funny and really fast shifts in my life, where like the things I was doing no longer made sense. And I knew that something had to change. And out of nowhere, after getting fired from my job at Starbucks for telling the truth, at the end of the day, I was legitimately fired from my job for telling the truth. I was being interviewed.
This is a veteran story right here. This is a 100% veteran story.
Yeah, man. Listen, one of my principles that like I try to live by is lead with truth, man. Like I just, what the points of lying, it serves no one, especially not me. So I'm just going to tell you the truth. And like, that's how I live my life. And during an interview, after 6 months of being at Starbucks, I was interviewing for promotion. I finished the entire interview. The second manager from the other store goes off, and it's just me and my store manager. And she's like, I do have to bring to your attention, somebody here told me that you may have eaten pot cookies and come to work. And I was like, yep. Like, what about it? I was like, I eat pot cookies at home, Jenna, and then sometimes I come to work. Like, but like me and you have talked while I've like been on edibles. Like, can you recall when? Like, does it change the fact that I'm the guy who stayed late to assist bug bombing this place, and then like came in of my own volition the next morning at like 3:45 after leaving at midnight, because when I told you that you were not going to have enough hands on deck to prepare the store for opening at the time frame you think you are, like working at 8 different locations when people called off sick at the different stores all around this regional area, like the fact that customers come in here all day every day and like enjoy spending time with me, talking to me, like making connections, like does it change any of that? And like I didn't really say all of that during that interview. I was just like, yeah, like I use marijuana in my free time at home. Like, you know this, like we've talked about my psychedelic experiences, my like whole spiritual thing I was going through, my yoga teacher training at the time, and my store manager knew all of it. Like on a day-to-day basis, she knew all of it. So I told her the truth, and she was like, okay, great. She's like, from here I'm going to have to kind of talk to people about where we're supposed to go next. 2 weeks later, I go into work one day and she's like, we got to talk. And I was like, okay. So I sat down and she's like, I have to let you go. And I was like, for like 10 minutes, I was ready to like sue Starbucks for libel. I was like, you don't know when I came to Starbucks on pot cookies. None of your customers can recollect the time that I've been here. I know for a fact if I like got caught snorting cocaine off the bathroom toilet and was just like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, I just had a lot of coffee today. Like, things good. I'm good. What's wrong? Like, I would still have my job here if I had just lied to you. And that was, for me, that was really the day that I knew the idea of kind of working corporate America was not something I was interested in anymore. I was just like, this whole system is ass backwards, where it's like somebody literally gets caught doing cocaine and like just lies. They still have their job. Somebody who's just like honest and open and upfront about like what they do with their life in their personal time outside of work, and like that gets you fired. And shortly after that, this random stranger walks into my yoga studio and presented an opportunity that existed way out west. So I took it, man. I took a leap of faith. I threw a mattress in the back of a van and I left Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania for California for an educational financial opportunity that turned into the last 5 years of my life. But that leap of faith, while fun, while very educational, has I think reached the it's nearly at least reached the end of the road, where I'm now kind of looking for that next opportunity, as I discussed a little earlier. And it's like, when I find the next thing that really makes 100% sense to me, then it'll just be time to take that leap of faith. So I'm looking for the next place. We'll see what happens. I think the next couple of months will be telling for where my life is heading.
You're going to land on your feet in a spectacular fashion here, because I hope everybody watching this podcast has seen the previous one too. But for those that aren't on Twitter, Bitcoin Twitter, as they say, Kyle had this, like, you had this crazy kind of Bitcoin's the situation with this hardware wallet that you had, and using the power of social media, you got in contact with like the CEO, the CTO, the COO, like all these people that ran the company that built this thing, and had this, it turned into this like really viral Twitter back and forth. And then you actually got them on the podcast. And not only did that, but you had like a neutral third party, or even like a contrarian third party on the podcast, like sharpshooting I don't know if he was the chief operating officer, or what was
CTO.
CTO, the CTO of this company, and this like other guy who I hadn't heard of before, but he seemed pretty knowledgeable on, and he was like sharpshooting him, like, hey, why'd you do this? I disagree with your design decision here. And it was like, it's such a breath of fresh air to hear that, because I mean, the mainstream media, if you turn on TV, there's no like authentic interaction at all. Everything's just scripted, and you know, the guests are chosen because they know what they're going to say. It's totally controlled. And even in, you know, a lot of the mainstream or more mainstream podcasting world, you don't have that kind of like authentic interaction. And I think if you can maintain that on this like podcast, I mean, I know you have a lot of career options ahead of you, but if you want to be a professional podcaster, or even just do it as like a part-time thing in addition to whatever else you were doing, I think if you can maintain that kind of like forum where you have you know, really authentic, unscripted conversations where there's actually a real debate happening, and it's not just like two people reading their talking points and then everybody goes home, like that could be a real important part of like the Bitcoin media sphere. And the legacy media has totally missed out on Bitcoin. You see it every day. CNBC, New York Times. Just today, New York Times is, you know, they're publishing opinion pieces by these windbags like Nouriel Rubini, who's just like, Bitcoin's a scam. I'm like, dude, it's like, you can't say that anymore. It's been too long. It's gone too far. You can't say it's a scam, you know. And the legacy media missed it. So new media is going to be the big beneficiary of like the Bitcoin media windfall. And I think you have like a pretty important role to play in that if you can keep that up. So I'm very bullish on your future in Bitcoin, whether it's as a podcaster or at like a corporate Bitcoin firm, or even a startup. There's just so much stuff happening right now. I don't think you're going to have a hard time finding your place here.
I think the one thing that I am semi sure of is that the one of a handful of like the benefits to the van life. There are many challenges that come with it as well, but one of the many benefits is that I have built a lifestyle with very little overhead financially, which has left me with an abundance of time. So right now, I know with that advantage in mind, I am also semi-optimistic that things will work out as far as having the ability to find where I fit and plug in. Like again, I've now interviewed with a handful of people working at some Bitcoin-focused Bitcoin companies. None of them are hiring at the moment with the market kind of trading the way that the market's trading. Most of them are talking about the hiring won't really pick back up until the market picks back up. So it's really just a waiting game with some of the financial institutions that are in existence with Bitcoin today.
Yeah.
I was given a recommendation to maybe try and apply with Strike. They're kind of more in the startup phase and have like a heavy, fast kind of growth thing going on right now. So that's somewhere to look into. And then, yeah, man, it's just like, as you said, right now for me, it boils down to like, I got a lot of time on my hands. So like what to do with it. And I can only buy so much Bitcoin. I can only study like the pre-written, pre-subscribed like information. Listen, I've watched enough YouTube and read enough papers over the last 18 months to know that outside of really starting to now dive into the more technical aspect of things like the actual coding and the deeper base level stuff of like what Bitcoin actually is as far as math and code, and I'm not really that technical, so like that aspect of like the rabbit hole is something I still look at, but it's not going to consume the kind of time that like the more philosophical why of Bitcoin consumed over the last 5 years of my life. So at this point, yeah, it's just like this makes sense. It's like not that difficult to find interesting people that are doing interesting things and be like, hey man, got an hour to sit down and chat about what you're doing. Like I'd love to learn more about what it is you've got going on because I find it fascinating. And I think if I find it fascinating, there's a likelihood that at least someone, there's got to, out of like however many millions of people are Bitcoiners and like whatever percentage of them are like scrolling through YouTube looking for some new content, somebody out there is interested in a node that runs off satellite technology and solar. So put it out there,
I
you know?
hope so. No, I think you've got a great position here. Just in terms of like your podcast and where it fits in the like Bitcoin media sphere. Um, I'm curious though, like, so you say you're not like technically minded. I'm not, or not technical enough for, I don't know how you phrased it, the core, the essence of what Bitcoin is.
Yeah.
Um, Man, I don't consider myself in that bucket either. Like I have a really hard time programming. I've been spending like a week getting my website together and it's garbage. Um, so like, I kind of figured out the hardware side of things just by experimenting. I blew up a lot of stuff. I destroyed some equipment in the process, but it was just like a trial and error kind of process. I've been working my way through it, but I don't have a professional background in it. And then on the software side, there's like this huge open source community. Free and open source software is like what drives Bitcoin. So man, I am totally reliant on other people's software because I don't have the skills or the capability to do any of that stuff myself. So I would say like don't let that hold you back, because even if you can't do something yourself, there's other people that will do it for you, especially in the Bitcoin sphere. People are just excited about it, doing projects, happy to help out. So if there's like a specific app or product or something you want to build on Bitcoin, throw it out there. You have a huge audience on Twitter and social media and the podcast. Like if there's something you need help with, like I guarantee you there's some programmer or some guy that works at Google and he hates his life because he's stuck in corporate America looking for a cool project to work on. And if you have a really good grasp on like the Bitcoin culture, where things are heading, like products and services, if you're interested in this sphere, if you about that, I wouldn't let it hold you back just because you don't know how to personally program everything yourself. Like nobody does.
Yeah,
So I don't know. That's my 2 cents on that.
it's fair enough. I can honestly say I've spent some time thinking about like what could be built, like what app, what thing could actually be built, and I have yet to actually come up with anything that like keeps me up at night, that like makes me want to find that Google engineer who hates his life in corporate America. But I do believe that if I find it, I tend not to shy away from a challenge. So if I find something where I'm like Bitcoin needs that, I will certainly take your advice and then take that leap of faith. So
Yeah.
that's what it's all
So
about.
so yeah, speaking of leaps of faith, or going back to your story from before, I don't want to backtrack too much, but it just like resonated so much when you said that, um, or when I got out of the military, I had a hard time adjusting too, because like compared to being it's just a different job. You know, when you're a combat medic in the army, it's like every day you go to work and they beat it into you that somebody's life is on the line, so don't fuck this up, right? And it's like every day, and you just get used to it. And then when I got out of the military and I was, you know, a college student again with like no real responsibility in life, let's be real here, it's like nothing seemed important. And I had such a hard time like finding that balance of like, how did it go from everything being like a matter of life and death for like 6 years in a row, and being a combat medic, to I'm a college student now and it's like every day's a party and nothing matters. It's like total polar opposites, and it's been really hard. I'm still struggling with it to find like that middle ground of like some things matter and some things really don't matter. And I've like kind of lived in like the polar opposites for a long time. I'm kind of finally hitting the sweet spot here. But no, it just
I,
like resonated a lot, your whole story there.
that definition or description, yeah, I would say it resonates as well. It's just like there's that idea of polar opposites. Is like I was just talking to one of my yoga teachers the other day, and she talked about how she's transitioned her family from vegetarian to vegan, and they're now like 100% plant-based. And I was like, that's crazy, because I'm now like 100% meat-based. Like the universe always finds balance. And she's like, Kyle, she's like, that's just you. She's like, you bounce from one extreme to the other. And I was like, that's a valid thing that you've noticed. And I've noticed it too. And to be honest, for a long time, that was one of the things that I struggled with, was that it was actually a struggle to come to terms with the fact that there was always like these two like diametrically opposed things happening. It's like 1 minute I'm all the way over here, and 1 minute I'm all the way over here. 1 minute everything is life and death, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The next minute I'm just like, again, like you said, just like a college student who like spends 7 nights a week drinking and like flirting with girls and partying with my roommate. And like that's all there is to it. And it's like, how did it go from like all of this to like this? And the
Yeah.
purpose the purpose for it all is what starts to get lost if you don't find something in the middle. It's like, not everything is life and death, and not everything is completely meaningless. And it's like, if you don't find some kind of middle ground, man, it's hard to get lost on either side of that spectrum. And that's what happened for me. It's like, for a long time, I was like unhappy with the fact that I bounced from one extreme to another, from one thing to another. And it always felt like I was um maybe just like not finishing through with things I started. And I've found over maybe the last couple of years, 4 or 5 years now, I would say that, again, really coming back to the theme of this particular episode, like the idea of a leap of faith, is that when I find something that I'm curious about or passionate about, I'm not the guy who sticks his toe in the water. I don't make sure it's like the right temperature. I'm just like, I'm interested in that thing over there, and I go 110%. Sometimes the water's freezing cold, and I get the hell out and I'm done. And I'm like, it
Yeah.
lasts one day, and that's good for me. It used to bother me, but I've come to terms with the fact that like I'm all in. And when I'm all in, it's a lot easier and a lot faster to like acknowledge what works and what doesn't work. And I think that's one of the things that's really exciting right now about Bitcoin, is that like I went 100%, and I've been in it now at 100% for 18 months. And that 100% doesn't feel like it's 100% anymore. It's like, now that I'm here for 18 months, it's like I got to find a new way to get to 100%, because my 100% 18 months ago is now only like 92%, and I need to find that 8% to like get back to it. So
Yeah. For me, like it was a big paradigm shift for me when I took on this role with the nonprofit in Peru, because a lot of our field team in Peru is like connected to Christian ministries, and I'm Jewish myself. I'm like not here to preach the gospel or whatever, but there's like such a humanitarian crisis there, and just to talk to our guys that are dealing with this every day, like these tragedy stories, people like really impacted by COVID in a negative way, and all kinds of other stuff, and just like hearing how they've coped with that for years, before we kind of brought the Bitcoin thing into the equation, just doing the humanitarian side of it, and they're using like their faith and preaching that in uh, their area, and helping families and children and people that have been really marginalized and victimized in a lot of ways kind of build themselves back up with that. It's been really inspiring to see, to be honest. People that like, um, the in the Andean mountains in Peru, there's like the winters are absolutely brutal, and there's these kids that their feet will freeze in the winter, and some of them end up dying when they're because of like foot injuries. And so Motive created this program called Life Saving Steps that provides a pair of shoes and a visit from a foot doctor once a year to some of these like rural places. And some of the kids that were like basically written off in their communities as, he's a goner because his feet are going to freeze, like let's not waste our time helping him. These like, there's this kid there, his name's Jonathan, and his family, um, he had like came from a really rough family situation, and the rest of the community wasn't taking care of him because they just like wrote him off as, yeah, he's probably going to die next winter. And being able to like intervene in that situation with something as little as a pair of shoes. And the coolest part is we got to pay the shoe manufacturer in Bitcoin. So we got them on Bitcoin now too. Not to sidetrack too much, but yeah, being able to see like how faith in that community and how we could rebuild faith from this like terrible situation. Yeah, it's such a key part of it, just like believing. And when people stop believing and start having a negative outlook, it's persistent and it builds inertia and gravity. And you just need to counterbalance that and find some good in the world, find something you're excited about, find something to work towards. And and it's always a balance. It's never going to be 100% in the right direction, everything kind of lining up. It's going to be a balance. And there's hard days and there's easy days, and just do it
Yin
one
and
day at a
yang,
time.
man. It's fascinating that you talk about like kind of religion and then Bitcoin all in the same sentence, because again, we're sitting here having a conversation about faith as one of the principles that you can find and or hone through Bitcoin. And I do believe that there are a handful of principles that seem to be very common amongst almost all of the people who are genuine Bitcoiners. Like there's overarching themes that a lot of people pick up on in their life, and I think faith is one of them. So I mean, I hear jokes about it. It's like, have you heard about our Lord and Savior Satoshi Nakamoto? And it's like, it's a funny little meme, but like at the same time, it's like the overlap between spirituality, religions, call it what you will, and faith from Bitcoin. I think there's a parallel there that's very real. And so to kind of bring this whole thing full circle, if you don't mind, I'd really like to know just one last question. How has Bitcoin either given you hope or helped you hone your own faith?
That's a good question. Yeah, Bitcoin is a leap of faith because, if you're, I'm like you, I have a tremendous amount of my net worth tied up in Bitcoin. And if something unforeseeable happened and it went away, it would cause a pretty drastic change in my quality of life. And I'd have to go out and be a barista here pretty soon, right? Bitcoin is a leap of faith because you're putting your trust in yourself. That for me, I didn't, when I first read about Bitcoin, I didn't go in 100%. It took me years to like research, learn everything I could about Bitcoin, convince myself this isn't a scam. Why is it working for some people? Maybe it can work for me. I had to learn a little bit of math. I had to learn a little bit of economics. I had to learn a little bit of history, a little bit of finance, a little bit of like a lot of different disciplines. And at the end of the day, it was faith in myself that I had looked at all the angles, and I was ready to commit towards this, monetary system, whatever you want to call it, investment strategy. It's turning into a culture now. It was faith in myself and faith in that other people would see it the same way that I do. So I don't know if that's like more of a spirituality or, guy with gray beard in the sky kind of thing, but I think Bitcoin definitely is, to get into Bitcoin and be like the Bitcoiners that are the most convicted I've ever met. A lot of them are very religious or very spiritual. There's a great dude that goes to our Orange County Bitcoin meetup meetings. His name's George McHale, and he wrote a book called Thank God for Bitcoin, which I highly recommend to everybody. And Code wrote it with a bunch of other really cool people like Jimmy Song. And I think there's like 8 authors. I recommend everybody go check it out. And if you happen to be in Orange County on a Thursday evening, please feel free to stop by the Orange County Bitcoin Network. We meet every week. It's a great group of people. But not to go too far off track here, but yeah, Bitcoin is faith in yourself that you've figured it out, and then it's also faith that you're going to be able to take care of yourself and be self-sufficient, because the whole point of fiat is that the government can print more of it, and it naturally devolves into a welfare state, right? It's the government's always going to be there to take care of me. That's how fiat works, is they print more money and they distribute it to people they see fit. So whether you don't have healthcare, you can still call 911, and an ambulance is going to come pick you up and take care of you and bring you to the hospital. It doesn't matter how poor you are, right? That's because we have a fiat economic system, and the government provides a lot of these services and backfills it with debt and everything else. Bitcoin is kind of contrary into that, where you can't just print more Bitcoin, right? So the assumption on buying into Bitcoin and building your, whether you want to call it your income statement, your balance sheet, your portfolio on a Bitcoin basis, is that you can't just hit the magic dilute button. Oh, we need more units of currency, we're going to dilute this down and then spread it out the way we need to. You can't do that with Bitcoin. So that in itself is kind of a measure of faith that things are going to be able to work out, and you're going to be able to manage the resources you have and add to those resources, or use your resources in a way that is hopefully productive or necessary for what you want to do in life and what your goals are. And yeah, I don't know if yeah, the memes of have you met our Lord and Savior Satoshi Nakamoto? I mean, at the end of the day, I tell people, people like to say Bitcoin is hard money. Bitcoin is the best money that we've ever had. I agree with that, but at the end of the day, it's just money, and life has always been about much more than money. So even though Bitcoin is the best money we've ever had, I believe that without a shadow of a doubt, there's timeless wisdom that there's more in life than just money. It's just one thing.
So yeah, great answer. And to wrap it up, I would simply say, I think I agree with most of what you had to say. Where I think I would word things a little bit differently is that, for me, I actually don't look at Bitcoin as money. Like some people call it an asset, some people call it money. The way I've actually started to look at Bitcoin is that it's first and foremost that guiding set of principles. Like, the way I actually see Bitcoin is that it is actually a lens in which the world can view the way human society operates as a whole. It's a new view of how society can operate on a scale at which we have gotten to today. And like, at the scale at which we operate today, the nation state is no longer efficiently allowing us to evolve and grow in the ways that we need to. And the way I see Bitcoin is that, like, Bitcoin is actually, it's showing us a way forward, and it just actually happens to be, like, as an added benefit, it happens to be a network that is connecting all of us. And then as like an even lower totem down the network effect from there, it also just happens to be a money. So it's like, here's this thing that is literally like a guiding set of principles that can help humanity evolve beyond the limitations where we are today, that also helps connect all of us together so that we can do that. And then it also operates as a money so that we can exchange value amongst ourselves. And that's where I find myself with what I believe Bitcoin is, and why I'm so bullish on Bitcoin today. So,
man, that's a hell of a conviction. Some company should hire you to be telling clients about that.
And I'm out here, guys. Hit me up. All right, man. Well, hey, it's been a great chat. Again, thanks for coming on, man. We'll have to do this again sometime. I look forward to seeing and hearing about what's going on with your projects in Peru and with all of the things you're building, dude.
Awesome. Thanks, Kyle. I appreciate it. Have a good evening.
Yeah, man. You too.